Defeating Margit the Fell Omen serves as a rite of passage for new players during their first Elden Ring playthrough. He's a gatekeeper not only to Stormveil Castle, but to our mastery of Elden Ring's fighting mechanics, and he challenges all newcomers to improve their combat skills in order to progress further in the game. He can be one of the first few hurdles for many to overcome, and this video will attempt to be a comprehensive beginner's guide for defeating Margit the Fell Omen. I'll go over the different ways you can prepare for this boss fight beforehand, and we'll talk about the different combat options you have when fighting Margit. So if you're only interested in that, you can skip to this time here. But if you're needing some extra help in preparing for this fight, I'll say that survivability is the main goal here in this early game. First, let's quickly talk about soul level. I recommend being around soul level 30 to 35 before challenging Margit, and you should focus on leveling up your vigor during this stage of leveling. So getting that up to about level 20 should give you that extra bit of health needed when fighting this boss. Next, let's increase the amount of Crimson Tier charges that you have, and to do this, you'll collect a few golden seeds that are around the Limgrave. The first you should come across pretty naturally on your way to Margit once you pass through Storm Gate and enter into Storm Hill. The second one you can find just outside of Ford Height, and the third can be found in the southern part of Limgrave, the Weeping Peninsula, at this location here. You'll also want to pick up the Flask of Wondrous Physic, so you can head over to the Third Church America for that. Keep in mind that you can purchase the location details from Merchant Kale, and be sure to pick up the flask and the sacred tier in this location. Both of these will increase your survivability, with the Flask of Wondrous Physic essentially adding another healing charge for you in the early game, while the sacred tier increases the amount of health healed by your Flask of Crimson Tears. If you take these steps before fighting Margit, you should have about 7 healing charges from your flasks, depending on how you allocate the Crimson Tier charges. And if you can get your vigor to level 20, you should have enough health and healing to approach this boss fight comfortably. If you're enjoying the video so far, I would appreciate a like. The goal is 50, so that would be awesome if you could help out with that. Now let's discuss some key items and weapons that you can use against Margit the Fell Omen. If you plan on using melee to fight Margit, let's head over to Murkwater Cave for a treasure trove of items that you can pick up to help you with that. Right outside of the cave, you'll be invaded by a red phantom, and defeating him will give you Reduvia, which is perfect for bleed buildup against Margit and will just take chunks off of his health. And once you enter the cave, you'll eventually encounter and fight Patches. It's optional here whether to defeat him or not, but keep in mind that you'll still have access to the items he sells if you decide to delete him here. However, I'd let him live if this is your first playthrough, so that way you'll still be able to go through and experience his entire questline. If you do this, the next time you rest at a site of grace and revisit Patches, you'll be able to purchase some key items from him, one of which being Margit's Shackle, which is going to allow you to bind Margit to the earth during his first phase and is a great item to deal some easy damage to him. You'll have 2 uses per fight, but this will only work during his first phase. Even if you only use it once, after he goes into his second phase, the item is essentially rendered ineffective. The next item to pick up from Patches for the more combat savvy Souls player is the Parrying Dagger. Margit has a couple of moves that can end the fight if he catches the players off guard with them. This move is one of them and only happens during his second phase, but this is where parrying comes in handy. With the right timing and anticipation, you'll be able to recognize when he's going to use this attack and parry it. It's risky, but another option would be to run and try to dodge away. Either way, there's a risk with both of these options, so ultimately you'll have to use your best judgment on what to do when you encounter this situation, because every fight will be unique. With that said, it's useful to learn how to parry Margit, because he also has a few moves that you can parry pretty easily. Keep in mind that you'll need to parry him twice in order to deal a critical hit, but the good news is you can often land a second parry immediately after landing the first. Fire and magic are going to be your best friends against Margit. He's weak to both, so using one of these 2 magic types are always a great option for dealing big damage against this boss. I personally recommend Catch Flame, which you can get from Brother Corhyn in Roundtable Hold. I prefer this spell because it's relatively quick to cast and allows you to maintain a close distance to Margit, which makes his moves a bit easier to dodge in my opinion. If sorceries are better suited for your build and playstyle, you can purchase glintstone spells from sorcerer Selin, who's located at the Waypoint Ruins in the Weeping Peninsula. Overall, it's hard to argue with the effectiveness of magic and fire against Margit. I would say that there are some drawbacks like the casting time and also maybe having to reallocate some Crimson tier charges to your Cerulean tiers, but to be completely honest, you'll probably end the fight before you need those extra healing charges anyways. So this may be a playstyle that you might want to consider if you haven't incorporated it already. But let's not forget using spirits and summons, because these are probably the most beginner friendly options that you have. Using either the Lone Wolf Ashes that you get from Rena or the Spirit Jellyfish Ashes, which you can get from Rodrika in Stormhill Shack, can allow you to deal passive damage if you're able to distract Margit so they can attack, especially the Jellyfish Ashes. You can also summon Sorcerer Ragier if you want. He's located right outside the fog gate leading to Margit. And I would absolutely encourage newer players to take these options because, frankly, they're just fun to use. So now that we've covered all the different ways that you can fight Margit, I'll talk about my preferred approach, which lately has been a blend of melee and close range pyro. For the first phase, I like to mainly use melee and Margit's shackle. At the opening, I like to try and bait out that initial jumping attack that he'll sometimes do, and when he's in the air, just walk straight for a few steps, disengage the lock on, and dodge roll underneath him before punishing his recovery with a few attacks. Don't be shy about using his shackles either, since it's only useful for about the first 40% of his health bar, but the two uses are perfect for melting his health by that much. After his second phase starts, I switch to Catch Flame, and essentially nothing changes for me. I dodge roll most of his attacks, and I act as if I'm still a melee fighter, only I'm dealing significantly more damage to Margit than I would if I were just using my weapon. I find that if I fight Margit like this, I don't really have to worry too much about trying to land parries or even being overly aggressive. I even found that I don't need to heal as much because the fight is usually over pretty quick this way. If you can't use Catch Flame, my next approach would be to use a weapon like the Uchigatana or the Reduvia for bleed buildup, along with a powerful weapon art. This in its own right will deal significant damage to Margit, especially a weapon art like Unsheathe. I found that landing those hits deal comparable damage to Catch Flame. But if you can't use the Uchigatana or spells, you can still employ a good mix of dodging and parrying along with a pretty steady and relentless offense. This way, you'll be able to deal steady damage and land your critical hits, and over time you'll be able to read Margit and parry some of his moves. Granted, he does have some that are tricky to time, but sometimes if you whiff a parry on those moves, you can usually find yourself recovering in time to dodge before he actually lets it out. Either way, most of his moves should be dodged, and I wouldn't rely too much on trying to land a parry, but it does feel good to land, and I encourage players who are trying to get better at the game to try and incorporate this into their playstyle gradually. If the fight isn't going well, throw out some parries, so that way you can at least get some practice in. Margit is a tough boss, and for your first playthrough, he can seem almost impossible to defeat, but there are many options and ways to approach this fight for all kinds of players and playstyles. You don't have to do everything in this video, but hopefully if you found something useful to incorporate into your gameplay, it'll help you overcome this hurdle and open up the path to Stormveil Castle, where we can continue this journey in another video. But for now, that's going to wrap up this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.